The very first public land sales in America took place near Zane's Trace. It's how your ancestors gained access to the new lands in the interior of the Ohio country. So this is around like early 1800s, right? They're just getting started. They would take some basic necessities with them on a wagon and travel. And there were reserves. The U.S. military district, the upper portion of the Virginia military district, reserves public land set aside for bounty land, and it's only given to soldiers of the Revolutionary War. So basically everybody settling is either currently in the military or formerly in the military. And so that's how you would get land grants. And so they're on pensions. And many of the people who used them to acquire land, they followed Zane's Trace to get there. So basically, you only went where you were allowed to go. And German settlers, that's where my family comes from. So my family came from Pennsylvania. Not that early, it was later on. The first published periodical was in the German language called Der Ohio Adler. So here you have the canal boats. They pushed their gondola canals and paddled their canoes and their flatboats on the canals of Ohio, because they already had canals, I think. I don't believe the story about the building of the canals just decades after the state became a state and was first being populated. But they say they'd have custom-built flatboats capable of holding wagons that were carrying household furniture, barrels of food and commodities, plus horses, cattle, sheep, pigs, and children. Oh, boy. Oh, the way they write, it carries over, from the material that they're reading. They have the special ability, they believe virtually everything they read, and the attitude carries over, too. They would first hire a boatman, usually recruited out of a local tavern. So it's just like a scene out of Star Wars. You go to Mos Eisley. It's a den of iniquity. Right? It's scum and villainy. And sure, I could take you, but it'll cost you. How much? 15,000 credits, or whatever it was. The U.S. military district and the Virginia military district and the flatboats, and they had steamboats. So already, just from the very beginning, there's already steamboats. And here's, just looking at these maps, you'll see in a minute how the very first maps of cities, like not even the most major cities like Cincinnati or Cleveland. I was looking at Hamilton, for example, which is kind of a suburb. It's kind of a near the Dayton region, Cincinnati, Dayton. And it's as built out almost as it is today. But here they have a Catholic orphan asylum, and you just keep seeing there's cemeteries all over the place. They didn't even have enough, like a whole bunch of people migrated in just to die in the first few decades of the state. Because the population, they said, was barely about 4,000 just when it was becoming a state. It's hardly anything. Well, they say they don't know. See, they fudged it because people would have said something about it, but the official numbers were all over the place because they said they kept losing the records and they weren't keeping the records very well. But here you have a map of Cincinnati and suburbs, Covington and Newport, and already, boom, it's very, this is like mid-1800s. So it's just like the story of San Francisco, okay? And the point of this video is not just to show you that the story needs questioning. There's a cemetery there. You have driving parks. You have recreational parks. It's just amazing. no way did it all just build up. I see airports as well that pop up. This doesn't show it, but there's some interesting features that shouldn't have really been there at the time. Um, they get a little covered up, but they don't do a good job. I mean, in some of the roads, it's way overbuilt for the time, and there's no real explanation for it. But what we're going to do in this video, by the time we get to the end, is we're going to glean what was really going on. What is it that they're hiding, and why? We're going to start to really hit on those things from now on. And you compare. Okay, this is a comparison, I think, between Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, 1855. Is that right? So how could it be? It would make sense that Pittsburgh would be much more built up, and the bridge in Cincinnati was built by the same guy who built the Manhattan Bridge, and it actually looks about the same. The old world one, not the Washington Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge. The bridge in Cincinnati is like that. So here in 1804, in this map, they have Army land marked out here, and Lake Erie. The story from the region here on the left side of Lake Erie, where I spent most of my life, is that there was this black swamp, and it got drained by German engineers, and those ditches are very real, and they're there, and there's such of a, it's so flat, it's so difficult to grade it to get water out if it did flood. But it's amazing how how well it's done when the land is so flat and the water table is extremely high. There's never really trouble with flooding. It's so well done, and it's possible, I suppose, that it could have been done by a couple guys in the 1800s with some crews and whatnot. Who would finance it, and how would they accomplish it to level and regrade so much land, unless it was naturally that way? But I doubt it, because it's so well done. It would easily become a swamp if you didn't have these slight slopes, and they're imperceptible slopes. You can drive for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, and you can't detect if you're going uphill or downhill once. It's that flat. But when there's a torrential downpour, and we do have those, there's not, you don't even go drive through puddles. It's not, and you would think, and you don't see the ditches. You don't have to worry about the ditches overflowing and everything, and they didn't even get blocked up, or there's almost like no issues. It's amazing. All that was done by 1850, plus they built the canals and all the railroads. But here they have, I thought that was funny. Is there really a white woman's river? When I first looked at it, I thought it was white woman's reserve. Like they have Indian reserves, and then they have reserves for white women, like in the army land. I don't know. I don't know. But it's a river. They named them all there. It's near Licking and some funny names around some of the places. But this is in southern. But who cleared all these trees? It's so much work with just a hand saw and maybe a steam shovel in some places. It's a tremendous amount of work. There's a swath that they show. I don't even know what that is. I think that's where the former beach of Lake Erie was. In fact, I do know that. That's the Sand Ridge. I think so. But that's where the shoreline of Lake Erie was. And so I think they say that like the Black Swamp is through there, but the Black Swamp kind of goes, like it would make an X to that in the direction that it goes. So I'm not totally sure what that is. But that they do say Indians defeated August 20th, 1794. So it's crazy. I really do think it's possible that the Indians were occupying buildings. It's just, I keep watching to see if any Native Americans are saying that, but their history could be so far removed from them. If that was their history, they may have no idea, and it's not their fault at all. There's these structures were around. The Indians at the time, the natives did talk about this, that these types of things had always been there. These types of strange man-made constructions, and they go deep into the ground too. Sometimes the state has stories about it, but usually the state wants that stuff and it keeps people away, but sometimes it's too late. People know about it. I did think about tornadoes as reducing trees, because that is something that's happened, not in my lifetime, but I've had my brushes with tornadoes and funnels, and if you remember, if you were listening to this channel, it was 2 years ago, 1 or 2 years ago. It was either last summer, I think the summer before. I'd call it a tornado. It wasn't officially. It didn't get recorded. It was a funnel, but it took the tops of the trees off to strip the bark, took branches, huge branches, and just removed them. And in my backyard, it knocked a tree down and stripped the bark off and removed branches from the upper part of another one. And it just kind of picked back up, and then it went over to like the nearby local high school. There's a really tall tree there, and it stripped a bunch of bark off the top of that tree. And I was here when it happened. We heard it, and yeah, it was. You hear like the whooshing sound. It got really loud, and then there was the crash of the tree going down. And I got lucky. The tree fell between my house and the neighbor's house. It just threaded the needle. It was amazing. It was amazing. There's like no damage, and very lucky. But this one here is something that my parents witnessed. It started where my parents were living at the time, right at the beginning of this long line. That was an F5 tornado that cut through there. I believe that's the one. Maybe the darker lines, it could be that one, but that tornado destroyed everything in its path. So it could be something like that would wipe out the trees, but just the frequency and the square footage or the area covered by tornadoes just wouldn't account for the removal of trees. It really wouldn't. It's not even close. So it's not even worth mentioning, other than to discount it. So the trees grow so much faster than the tornadoes would ever come. This is a town out in the middle of nowhere. Fostoria, I think it is. Yes. And this is an example of, look at the roads. It's like they just kind of uncovered it, just swept the roads off, sweep the dust off the roads, start occupying the homes, or maybe if the homes had been demolished by the military, they just build new ones, and there you go. And then I thought it interesting how some of these roads seem to be disconnected, where they decided to dig up and end the road that would have gone through, because it would make sense to have this like triangle here. Why would you do that when that doesn't go through? But it seems like it used to. Anyway, it's just a drawing, but they have the rail lines and everything like that. And there isn't much to do in Fostoria or anything. So Oxford Township. So this is like near Hamilton, I think. So we're talking like Cincinnati, Dayton area. And they have huge mansions, huge buildings, huge churches built out of course, the stone and all that stuff. And just have a look. Look at the detail. I think this is right county 1855, and you have everything's like divvied out and built and farmed, and streets all over the place. What looks to me, in some cases, like airstrips in places. Not on this one. There's plenty of schools. There's plenty of cemeteries. There are districts and wards and orphanages and when you look at the names of the people who own it, it's Colonel this, Major that, General this, and Sergeant that. And so this map, this was given by an anonymous donor. So it wasn't supposed to be out there. So it caught my interest. When staff members unfurled the gift from an anonymous donor. Why would they be anonymous? Don't they want to take credit? Oh, because they knew. All the way back in 2005, they knew it's not really supposed to be out there. So best stay anonymous and get it out there before it gets squashed, quashed, censored, squashed by the man. When staff members unfurled the gift to see exactly what it was, they were amazed. Before them was an original 1855 map of Butler County, Ohio. The only other original is known to exist, or only one other. So it identifies landowners and acreages. Okay, so like I said, a lot of them are colonels and whatnot. And I thought this was interesting. There's no context with this, but this is another county in Ohio. And it just shows all this developed land from a long time ago, and there's no structures there. This is the city of Sandusky, Ohio. So if you're a fan of the movie Tommy Boy, that's where Tommy Boy works. Although they filmed that in Canada, I think, not in Sandusky, but they really did pick a place that really does look like Sandusky. I thought for years, it was filmed in Sandusky. I go there every summer to go to Cedar Point until that became mismanaged or something that's not as good as it used to be. But what do you see here? But it's the compass and square, I think. And it's a very old town. It's like old world in the downtowns. Here's an 1852 map, Muskingum County. I think that's in Ohio. Anyway, it's all built out. They have you can find what looks like airstrips. I'm not seeing it now, but you can do that type of thing on your own. But just look at the detail and look at the urbanization of it. Just how many plats. When half a century before that, they're just starting to roll in on they're getting stumped on the way. What are we going to do? They got to build their log cabins with their axes and hatchets and just chopping down the trees just to be able to farm. And it would be an incredible amount of effort and work just to have a log cabin and keep the trees at bay, much less build roads, much less do everything that they did. It's beyond my reckoning in many ways. Now, look at this. It's like they have people packed in close. It does make sense that you would have some of that, but what people, first of all? And then second of all, if it's all about farming and I guess without really good transportation, it would make sense to have close communities. But the thing is, the entirety of the landscape of the state is pretty much occupied and covered. The number of roads hasn't increased much in my lifetime at all. Like, all the roads were there. And I'm not that old, but I'm not that young. That's for a long time. All the roads were there. There are a few roads that have been added for suburbs, subdivisions. But beyond that, it's all platted out, square miles and then cross sectioned. And here you see these things. They have more roads than they have houses. They have all kinds of infrastructure that's way beyond the capacity. It makes sense if you know that it's growing. But Circleville, Ohio, 1836. And they have this huge structure there, this that's a lot of work to make that fancy circle. They did that and just, they just had arrived and up from Zane's Trace a dozen years, 2 dozen years before that, and they do all this. And the canals were done by then, and then the canals get shut down 10 years after. They're no good anymore. So with that airline road we saw, that's on the maps from before flight, before, the map we saw, I think it was in 1900s already, but the name of the road, I think the road existed there before then, because they say it was the airline road was named after this train company, I think, that was called Airline. But anyway, I'm not sure about that. But I find it interesting that the airmail had a path that was defined by these arrows. And these arrows are on the ground still to this day. They were painted, and supposedly the planes flying, they would just fly and visually look at the arrows and fly along the path that was prescribed. You, sir, you will fly along the path that is prescribed for you, and you shall not deviate from that path. Is that understood? Follow the concrete arrows. Don't fly over any area that you're not supposed to see. And it got me thinking about airmail, because there's something else that's air, and that's pneumatics. And they had that in the 1800s. The telegraph offices, for example, in Brandenburg Gate and Potsdamer Platz, they had this pneumatic post network in Germany, for example, the Berliner Rohrpost. The Berliner Rohrpost, which is a publicly accessible system of sending messages through pneumatic tubes. And the pneumatic post terminals were all over the place in the 1800s when you start looking around. And it was no different, I think, in the United States. It was a little bit more primitive, I think, but it really it wasn't. I think that it just is presented that way. They had it in England. They had it in New York. They had it in Paris here. A system kilometers long. Dozens of kilometers long officially, and the maps show routes going out without any explanation of where they terminate. It doesn't show a termination. It doesn't show it going to a station. The DC electric motors were huge, and here a so-called experimental pneumatic elevated subway developed on display. It was developed before that, but in 1867 that transports people. A passenger pneumatic car, they called them cars that they rode on. And in Prague, it says here, I might not see it, but it's like 40 some kilometers long officially that they had at the peak. And it traveled at 35 kilometers an hour. And it operated all the way till 2004. But it started probably before, they said, in the 1800s. Probably started then or before then even. And it's weldless piping connected by cap rings, guaranteed airtight connections. Doesn't have to be buried very deep, and it would run. But they sent people on these things as well. Some of them went underwater. There were way more of these than you realize. Yes, they were shown to the public at the Crystal Palace, for example. But they had proposals, because it was already built, I think they just considered using it, to have these postal tube systems going under. In New York, they said under the East River or over the suspension bridge, quote, if constructed. Under the North River to Jersey City, connecting to the Pneumatic Dispatch Company of New Jersey, to whom, as before stated, a charter has already been granted where they would extend their lines to the nearest important cities, probably Newark or Elizabeth, but it could be San Francisco. by means, so they had these things. And when you find these tunnels and you find these tubes and mysterious pipes underground, all you have to do is familiarize yourself with this. And I'm sure some people are listening who have worked in digging and maybe mining operations. I look at the ruins, I call them ruins, mountainsides. If there's a landslide or somebody goes into a cave that's largely unexplored and you see these tubes and pipes, sometimes they're completely degraded and remineralized, but the shapes of them are unmistakable. Pockets of survival, it shows these things, and they're of the different sizes. And some things are just like package size. Some things are larger. I think in the World's Fairs, they had suitcase size moving belts and track and trolley or tram systems. I think what mine carts are original to mines that were material handling systems that were used for just package delivery. Could have been long distance or short distance, but the old world used a lot of that. And I'm talking antediluvian, but also the previous civilizations after the flood. The evidence, once you familiarize yourself with this, you'll start seeing it. So this pneumatic, the so-called first pneumatic passenger car and tunnel, has operated in 1864. They had this tunnel and they built it out of brick just to run for a short time and charged people like 2 pence to go, like not even a quarter mile, and then just dead stop and go back. But you look at what these fellows wrote to each other, and it's interesting what they at least admit to. I'm sure they knew a lot more, but what you can read that they said, after all of the censorship, what's left, you can still glean some information. They say, it is an old notion, and by no means an erroneous one, that the power acquired by atmospheric pressure would realize greater safety economy and expedition than that obtained by ordinary locomotive. See, they knew this. This is back in the 1800s. This is a guy, I think he died in 1896. I don't know when he wrote this exactly, but this, the trial of the system of atmospheric propulsion for 14 years on the line from Paris to Saint-Germain bears witness to the absolute security attending to its adoption. So, but of course, as it must, until Elon Musk does his tube system, they had to have it like this, just like with electric cars. But the system has failed, and this has been due to the imperfect manner in which it has been carried out. Notwithstanding all that was done to develop the principle, it had to be abandoned, not from any inherent fault or fundamental error in the principle itself, but because the details of its application were not sufficiently mastered to render it a practical success. Now, it could be that they just simply couldn't get the system in place that they discovered and excavated to work. It takes a lot of expertise, and the people who built it and made it work were gone, and it had been left for who knows how many years, decades, centuries, who knows. To ensure, it should be spelled with an E, the effectual working of the atmospheric system, tunnels. Okay, so we'll skip down, I think. But it's interesting that they call it the tube, the tunnel or tube. When the London tube, they call it the tube for the passenger system. But supposedly they never used that much. 60 ounces. A pressure of not more than 3 or 4 ounces per square inch is all that is necessary. In the Crystal Palace tube, the train is moved through a tunnel having an area of 80 or 90 square feet at the rate of 30 or 40 miles per hour by a pressure of only 2.5 ounces on the square inch. So the pressure behind the train, but pulling a vacuum in the front is helpful as well. So they knew about this in the 1800s, and they're still working on it here in 2022. Elon Musk and his boring project, they call it. The subaqueous pneumatic dispatch of Whitehall Pneumatic Railway. So you can read this. It's interesting, though. They say here they're moving it through water, and they drop the tubes in the river, 13 feet diameter, and they covered it with brickwork. The tubes are built upon stocks and launched like a ship floated over the place. They're submerged, and then they pump the water out, and then they start moving people through. And because it's got positive air pressure, it's pretty safe. It's pretty interesting. And I think the London tubes and all that, they were this, but they changed it over to the less efficient, stinky, loud version that they have now, because that's what they do. Or they just couldn't make it work like the previous civilization already had done. But it's built with bricks. I thought that was interesting. Just bricks, so many bricks. But for a while, the pneumatic tubes were used quite a bit, just like in large, like I think old world buildings had this dispatch and delivery system, which would have been a lot of fun to use, to have a neat, for a while, a job there and send the tubes around. But I remember these streamlined so-called Art Deco trains, and I thought the shape of them and the way that they have the almost airtight kind of seals around them of the airline railroad, Seaboard Airline Railroad, through the heart of the South, not over it, through. Could have been a submerged train line or underground, a tube line that didn't run diesel or coal or whatever. It was, maybe it had a jet engine power, but it was air. And supposedly it's futuristic today, a vacuum train. See, the very fact that he said to use positive pressure, it told me that they probably actually used a vacuum, but positive pressure would make sense if you are underwater or if the tube that you're running through is in danger of flooding. They have these things that they build, like showing the failures beforehand, the crash trains or whatever, like with airplanes, to show, oh, we really had to work hard because we had no clue what we were doing, when actually they did. The technology was already there. And a lot of these trains that were said to be experimental, they're just seen laying around in scrap heaps, were probably used, and they were probably used in the manner that I described. And then the fact that some of them were powered by jet turbine engines. Here they show this kind of ridiculous stuff. This is Russia. In the United States, they did the same thing, I think, after that, as if that were new. And you look around at some futuristic-looking ruins or rubble or scrap trains, and sure enough, they look like that. Of course, there are drawings that's said to be science fiction or theoretical or design proposals of these belt trains, futuristic cities. It's like the movie Metropolis. And side by side, you have a steam locomotive, and then you have one that they say is the Burlington Zephyr at the Century of Progress Exposition, 1934. Well, they got that out. That's already old at that time. And, an art designer designed this one, but look at the baffles on the sides. There's only one reason to have those baffles on the lower sides, and I know what that reason is. Here, look at the front of that. There you have the jet engines again, pulling a vacuum, I think. Pulls a vacuum on the front, pushes air in the back. Makes perfect sense. And the fact that these jet turbine engines existed long before they said. In fact, I have a video about how the jet engine was invented. What was it, in 1916 or 1908? It was it was not long after the Wright brothers, and they had working jet engines. And then this train, there's the skeletal part on the front, but you just put some flat sheet metal there, and you can pull a vacuum, or you can create a seal in a tube. And the perfect shape of that is like the tunnel shapes that we're going to take a look at soon. You see these shapes don't make sense to do it the way that they did. And to give an example, what I'm talking about. Here's a steam shovel excavating something that looks like new construction. It's been preserved in sand. Maybe they poured all that, but at any rate, you look at tunnels around the world. Just like bricks, there are way more of these tunnels than anybody can possibly fathom. The more I look into it, the more it boggles my mind how many of these things are out there. And that's how many that remain. The vast majority of them have been buried, destroyed, filled in, forgotten, hidden, obscured. And when they started using them improperly, they have crashes, they have a learning curve because it's stupid. But there's every place along the spectrum between something that looks brand new and modern to just a natural formation to like an ancient like castle-like structure, all same dimensions or extremely close. Because you have your narrow gauge, your wide gauge. You have the two tunnels, the side-by-side tunnels, just like with the channel, because you have the traffic going the one direction, traffic going the other direction, the arteries that flow. Just like in London, you hear of this in Paris. As a case study, we'll look at Paris now, the intersection of 3 underground railways, it says. And this picture, I'll spend some more time on this picture because it's quite amazing. I'll make this the thumbnail of the video. Because this picture shows you the extent to which they have things built underground. And much of it could very well be these pneumatic tube systems of this larger size. And we already know in the official history, they had pneumatic tube systems of smaller sizes operating since the 1800s in Paris. Kilometers and kilometers and kilometers and kilometers of them. And the maps of those show no termination points. It shows them extending into the other districts, but those were never officially used. Supposedly just proposed. Just like in New York. Just proposed, not actually used. Here in this photographic evidence of supposedly repairing a section, it almost seems like the discovery and the repair of the one part. And here you have those masonry train tunnels, like people going in Paris, they have no idea. Cities like Paris, New York, when you walk around on the streets, you have no idea. That's how much is underneath you. It's a whole world down there. And it's old, and it's been used a lot, and it's carried a lot of stuff. And I think the old world civilization, they may have done some passenger travel if they were very populated, and I think they were, but being classy and sophisticated, mostly they would use it for things like waste disposal or just like package transport, things that make traffic annoying. Keep the nice stuff on the top, and then the like work related, like the fish market deliveries and that kind of stuff they do underground. Keep it out of the way. But like here, you could see, oh, well, maybe there's something underground. We should have a look. As it's fenced off in this district of Paris. Before we're populating it, let's find out what's underground. Before we have these, the orphans are getting older. The orphans from the orphan trains are getting older, and they're starting to get curious, and they want to see, and they want to start using this opera house because some of them are learning opera. And we're going to start filling the opera house, but there's this sinkhole. We got to figure out what's down there. And so they put up a fence, and nothing to see here. Carry on. Go back and get another pair of clothes that looks the same as everybody else's, and bugger off and don't ask questions. Go back to your ward. Curfew. Curfew's in effect. And they're just ladders and posts and poles, and it's a mess. This is not a construction. This is like a salvage recovery operation here. Demolition, they're just excavation. It's like a prospect mine or something that they're doing. They don't even know what they're getting into. It's just like with the old house, like I have it. You start to do a little bit of work, and it just keeps turning into a bigger and bigger project as you find things. Like I just peel up my floor because my house is from like the 1940s or something, and it's like you peel it up, and it's another layer and another layer and another layer, and it's like, oh my gosh. So they just excavated the whole thing out, and they rebuilt the whole section and dropped it down. And it probably was extremely, extremely difficult to do that with the modern power tools and everything like that. And it was everything they could do just to repair this one section that happened to collapse. Like, let's hope none of the other sections collapse. There's the oldie ladder lean. It's always there. Always there. And these well-planned, well-orchestrated things that are not. But they use shipbuilding skills to be able to do this. So you can look at these pictures if you want in greater detail. They're quite interesting. But these tunnels, the shape, the exact look of them, it's been around. This is from 1650, and these are ruins, and there you see these tunnels. Just like what you find if you go around West Virginia today or any part of the world, and you find these tunnels side by side, these archways, they are everywhere. This is this Utrecht? I forgot which city this is. It slipped my mind. This is a Heidelberg Castle. Oh wait, I gotta go back. I can see what this Koningsveld is. That one, but I think this one's in Belgium. I'm sorry, I can't remember, but at any rate, I mean, almost all the cities are about the same. This is from the mid 1600s, I think. Heidelberg Castle, same kind of tunnel shape. They did a piss poor job of covering that one up. But the red bricks, always. There's so many of them, so many red bricks. When were they all made? Even if people could make millions of bricks, a small number of people could make millions of bricks that were hardy bricks that would last this long. I don't know. Here's Hales Castle in East Linton. In the United Kingdom, there's those tunnels. Here's Nottingham Castle. Here's a concrete tunnel, same kind of shape. And they're just everywhere. This, I think this is a castle either in Germany or Switzerland. I'm not sure. This might be Heidelberg. I'm not sure. Sorry. But it doesn't matter. I mean, you can see. There's... Oh, it's mysterious. And how far does it go? It always goes a lot farther than anybody realizes. They say it's a mystery because there's no official history on it. And the Romans built them, and you can see them at various stages of meltature. Is that a word? Of having been melted, and the bricks kind of transition into the rock. And they can be found in the strangest places. And I might do another video just on this topic because I found a bunch of them in China that are extremely interesting. And I want to give a shout out to Curious Life, who has a video about tunnels that got me thinking about this again. And this is something that it's fractal. I mean, it goes on and on and on. You can look into these and you just keep finding disused railway tunnels, abandoned tunnels, mysterious tunnels, tunnels where there shouldn't be tunnels, tunnels in times, ancient Roman times, and hundreds of years BC, and tunnels that were used for just 1 year, like in Rome, or near Rome, they had a tunnel they built. Some emperor, I guess, I don't know, it wouldn't have been an emperor, but they built it for some reason, supposedly some war, and it just lasted a short time and they got rid of it. And the stories just are a joke. So, okay, so that's the end. And I thank you for watching, and I'll stop here. If you liked what you see and you want to hear more, be a good time to support the channel, become a patron, and help me to keep making the videos, because yeah, it's a kind of a crossroads for me with financially. Where I devote my time, I need to consider that, unfortunately, or well, I'm not going to apologize for it, because everybody's got to do that, and I hope to grow and just do ads and not have to have support. But if you want to, that would be appreciated. But I'd be just as happy if you supported other channels instead of mine that you like. If you like them more, that's all right. And I can, but the reality of it is, I would probably not produce as much content, at least for a while. So that's just the state of things at the moment. I thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Don't worry, I'll always be here. I'll always be here. So either way, it's just a matter of how much. How much do you like me? How much do you want to hear? And I hope a lot, because I have fun doing it, and I enjoy researching and doing a lot more of the humorous stuff. This is more of the scholarly research, which I almost can't stand to be that serious for that long. I'm about to explode. So I'll stop here and make up for it maybe in the following videos. And for those of you who don't like the silly comedic stuff and whatnot, too bad. Later.